大家好，我叫何非凡. Hi everyone, my name is Anthony, and today we're going to be talking about Chinese chess, or xiangqi. So xiangqi is a very, very old game that has a lot in common with international chess that we're all more familiar with, and a few really interesting differences. It's very, very old. People argue about how old it is, but it's several millennia old. This amazing complete set of bronze pieces was dated back to the Jin Dynasty, almost 1,000 years ago. So people have been playing this in the park with their friends for a very, very long time. It's popular in a lot of the same ways that chess is popular here in America, with the same sorts of people and the same sort of history. So let's get into it. Let's start with the board. There's a few noticeable differences on the board right away. The palace, known as Gong, and the river, known as He, are a couple of interesting features that have effects on the way the game is played. Pieces are placed on the points and not inside the squares. It shares that in common with Go and some other Chinese board games. And when you ask your friend to play around, you don't say wan. We don't use this verb that we're more familiar with, meaning play. Instead, you say 下一盘 or 下一局. You don't wan xiangqi, you 下 xiangqi. I'm not sure why, but I understand that's important. So let's go into the pieces. There's a lot in common here with Western chess, but some noticeable differences, like cannons and elephants. There's no bishops, we have elephants instead. So there's some differences between the red and the black in the writing. So like the pao, there's a 火字旁, there's a fire radical pao, and also a stone radical pao. They mean the same thing, they're pronounced the same way, and I think the differences in the way that the characters are written are because these pieces haven't always been red and black, right? There had to be a way to distinguish whose piece was whose, and so they did that by modifying the characters. See, this ma has a red radical, and this one doesn't. This xiang is elephant, and this one is I think means minister, but it's pronounced the same way, so it doesn't really matter. The English names I'll use to refer to them are the general, the advisor or the guard, the horse, the elephant, the chariot, the cannon, and the soldier. Now if you're sharp, you'll notice that the chariot is, I don't know if you can see this, but it says ju, it's pronounced ju, but you might have noticed that this character is just the traditional variant of che, meaning car. And you'd be right, but we don't say che in xiangqi, we say ju. I don't know why. Anyway, let's get into how the pieces move. So, the soldier is a lot like the pawn. They move one space forward, and they can never move backwards. There's a couple important differences though. They don't capture diagonally like international chess. They capture straight ahead, and after they cross the river, they can move left and right as well. So that's a pretty important thing that the river does. And there's a saying, 过河的兵很厉害. A soldier that's crossed the river is formidable because he can move not just forward, but also left and right, but never backwards. They can never wang ho. The chariot is exactly like a rook. In fact, I don't think there's any way that these are different. They're considered the most powerful piece on the board, and they move any number of spaces, front, back, left, or right. They start in the corners. These are exactly like rooks in Western chess. They're very important pieces. The cannons are one of my favorite. They're very interesting. So cannons move just like the chariots, any number of spaces in any direction, but the way that they capture is very different and unique. So cannons have to jump over exactly one piece to capture an enemy. Here you can see this black cannon is jumping over the soldier to capture the chariot. They can jump over any color piece, but they can only ever jump over one, and yeah, that's it. The piece that it jumps over is referred to as the pao tai, or the cannon platform, but that's not so important. Just remember that these guys have to jump to capture. The elephants are interesting as well. So the xiang piece moves 2 points diagonally in a shape that people call tian. I don't know if you can see that, or field. So over here you can see this elephant can jump 2 spaces diagonally. That's the only way it can ever move. But crucially, if there's a piece on the point in between where it is and where it wants to go, then it can't move there. Elephants can't jump. So this piece here, red's own cannon is blocking the elephant. So the elephant here can't move to here because his eye is blocked. They say that preventing an elephant from moving in a direction is called blocking the elephant's eye, or xiangqi. In the same way, horses can be blocked as well, but we'll get there in a sec. So horses move in the shape of the character R. They move up 1 and over 1. I hope this diagram explains better than I can say it with words. So they move over 1 and diagonal 1, or up 1 and diagonal 1. But in the same way that you can block the elephant's eye, you can also hobble the horse's leg. You can bie ma tui. So that would prevent the horse from moving here or here because he can't move that one intervening space. Horses can't jump in xiangqi. I know pretty sure they can jump in Western chess, but not here. Horses are also very important pieces. Okay, so let's move into the palace. The palace is a very interesting piece of the board. There are 3 pieces that can never leave the palace. That's the general and his guards. And we say general rather than king because, well, there's different stories, but some say it's because the Chinese kings objected to their royal titles being given to game pieces. Other people think it's because they were uncomfortable with the idea of a game whose goal it was to kill the king. But either way, we have generals and not kings. In fact, we actually have a general and a marshal, jiang and shuai, but that's not the point. The point is, they can never leave the palace, and they move differently. So the general can move up, down, left, right, 1 space at a time. He moves orthogonally, which is the opposite of diagonally, which is how his guards move. The palace guards move diagonally 1 space and can never leave the palace. So these guys get to be really important towards the end of the game. And a very important rule, and really odd the first time you play, the generals can never face each other. So if there were no pieces here, one of the generals could execute the flying general move, which never actually happens. They only use that to enforce checkmate. But if there were no pieces here, like if this general were over here and there were no pieces in between, this general would not be allowed to move into the line of sight of the opposing general. And so sometimes that's used to enforce checkmate. It's very strange, but very important. The generals must never face each other directly. Okay? So moving on, let's talk about some basic strategy. There's a lot of things in common with international chess, but there's a few important differences. Let's start with the similarities. Now, full disclaimer, I'm not very good at this game. I'm not very good at either variant of chess, but it's a ton of fun, and I hope you guys will try it out. So it's important to develop your pieces early. And what does that mean? That means your pieces aren't doing you any good here on the back line. You have to develop them. So you should be moving your chariot up and over. You should be moving your horse out of its starting position. You have to develop your pieces early. Also, pinning opposing pieces is always a good idea. So when you pin a piece, you are deterring your opponent from moving it, I think. If you have a piece pinned, it means that if your opponent were to do something with that piece, say attack you, then you would also be able to immediately capture that piece. So there's a lot of sort of mental strategy that goes into deterring your opponent or sort of forcing his hand to do something. And that gets into the idea of initiative. So initiative is one of those words that you'll hear a lot when people talk about chess, but you might not know what it means if you've never played chess. Initiative just refers to forcing the opponent to respond to your moves rather than make his own. Rather than allow your opponent to implement his own strategy and go on the offensive, you want to make sure that you're forcing him to respond to the threats that your pieces are making. Other things, other important ideas in Western chess don't translate so well. So there's a maxim in international chess that says you should control the center of the board, and that's less important in xiangqi. Also, there are some openings in Western chess where you start by moving your center pawn, and that's usually a mistake. You probably don't want to open by moving your center soldier. What else? Openings are a lot less complex. There's, I don't know how many openings in Western chess. They always talk about, the Spanish gambit or whatever. But there's a lot less of that in Chinese chess. Most of the theory, in fact, centers around the end game rather than the beginning. So let's talk about some common openings, because there's not so overwhelmingly many. So let's talk about the one single most common one. Probably the most common opening, especially at like non-competitive levels, is this. You move the cannon to the center file, and that allows you to immediately put pressure on your opponent along the central file, which is important because that's where the general starts out. And because this opening is so common, there is a very common response to it. That's to move the black horse from here to here. And that would allow him to threaten the cannon. If red chooses to jump over his soldier and capture this enemy soldier, then the horse would be able to respond. So this series of two moves as an opening is called 当头炮, 马来跳. 当头炮 is this cannon acting as head. This strategy where you're focusing on the cannon in the central file is called 当头炮. And 马来跳 means the horse jumps over. So if your opponent opens with the central cannon, then you respond by moving your horse. The screen horse's defense is also common. So even if you're playing black, and even if your opponent doesn't open with the central cannon, screen horses is this on both sides. And that's usually a pretty good defensive strategy. From this position, your horse can reach a lot of different places on the board that red is likely to try to attack. So if you're playing black and it's your first time, probably start off with the screen horse's defense, 平逢马. And a common early game goal, especially if you're playing defensively, is to connect the elephants. Now that sounds odd, but really it just means having one elephant cover for the other. So if your opponent captures one of the elephants, then the other elephant, so like if I had an elephant here, and my opponent captured it, so my opponent has a piece here, then this elephant can immediately respond by capturing my opponent's piece. So if you've connected the elephants, your opponent will be able to see that and think twice before trying to capture your valuable defensive elephant. There's lots and lots of strategies, lots and lots of different openings. There's a few good starter strategies that I hope I've explained well here. And the best way is just to try it yourself. If you're interested in this at all, and I hope you are a little bit, try out one of these free apps on the App Store. There's a ton of them. Some of them are good, some of them are less good. A lot of them have multiplayer, which is super fun. So you don't have to spend $20 on Amazon getting yourself a xiangqi board. You can just try it out on your phone. I think I use this one. And you're going to lose a lot at first, especially if you're playing against a computer. So don't get frustrated. Try to pay attention to the moves the computer makes and think about why. And honestly, this is a really great way to improve your language abilities. If you're interested in this and you feel motivated by it, seek out some YouTube tutorials, look for some strategy guides. Some of them are going to be written in Chinese, some of them are going to be written in English, some of them are going to be written side by side in both. So this can be a good way to motivate yourself to practice Chinese, especially YouTube tutorials with some good Mandarin speaking teachers. I hope you guys will try it, and I hope you're feeling interested in it. So, good luck. 再见.